The Eddsworld Fan Movie was a failed attempt by the community to make a full-length film based on the characters of Eddsworld. The whole thing was mired in controversy from beginning to end, faced new obstacles at every turn, and was cancelled after 7 whole years of production with almost nothing to show for it. And this is why. The Eddsworld Fan Movie has existed in the collective consciousness of the fandom ever since that very first trailer back in 2013. Production took so many twists and turns that when I made a video detailing the then complete history of the project back in 2020, it turned out to be my second longest video ever, and it still is to this day. I made that video in June with high hopes for the future, but exactly 3 months later, the entire project was pronounced dead. How did it all go so wrong so quickly? I'm working with Colin Pylord, ex-co-director of the film and current animator and background artist for Eddsworld itself, to give you a complete rundown of how it all fell apart. Colin was super useful, providing me with an entire first-hand account of his experience working on the film, as well as a bunch of never-before-seen images that I'll talk about near the end, so thanks for that, Colin. Now, even though that first video is 2 years old, it is still a perfectly good history of everything that went down between 2013 and 2020. I don't have time to go over everything in detail right now, so I will briefly recap all the important things that happened from its inception to Piptoons taking over. In 60 seconds. The Eddsworld Fan Movie project was founded by Mark Lavollo in 2013 as a way to celebrate the show's 10th anniversary. He uploaded a teaser trailer to the internet, promising a full-length film that would be completed within a year, despite having no script whatsoever. For a few years, the movie was in development limbo as Mark used the channel to upload polarizing minisodes like Best of Both Worlds, reviews, and basically everything that wasn't the fan movie. The whole thing was inefficient and got delayed repeatedly, with several crew members leaving entirely out of frustration. Mark himself eventually stepped down from his position as director, and after some changing of hands and crew reshuffles, Piptoons took over as lead director, thinking that he was the only one who could actually finish this thing with a brand new script. And that brings us to 2020. With a new director came a completely new vision. At this point, John Lopez had already come in and tried to fix the script he was left with, and the artists were making decent progress on the storyboards of this version of the story. But Pip wanted something entirely new. Same general story, but with a new script and even a new Discord server to boot. I've never really been a big Discord user myself, so I can't speak on this firsthand, but the Eddsworld Fan Movie was by far and away the biggest entity in the fandom for a long time. And one way they fostered that community was through their very own Discord server. Everything has been deleted now, but back in the day, it gave people a space to celebrate the film and its original characters. Particularly the villains, General McCoy and Private Martin, both of which were absolute fan favourites. As the face of the project itself, McCoy basically transcended the film and was subject to loads of fan art and even some fan-made backstories. A very popular character, to say the least. Either way, there was a new Discord server, a new script, and a change in team that saw production staff whittled down to only the most essential and active members, with a few new artists from the Discord server. But was this new director going to learn from past mistakes and direct his new streamlined crew into making this movie the best that it could possibly be? Well, no, not really. Progress at the start was promising. The first act was completed in one writing session, but the new revision of the script was never completed. Just like with previous directors, Pip used the channel for a bunch of supplementary material and fell into all the same traps. They've been deleted now, but they hosted some new live streams and tried to make this supplementary podcast a thing for a couple of episodes. They also wanted to bring back the minisodes, if you can believe it. Production on the original shorts was shut down initially out of copyright necessity, especially since a bunch of the fan movie's crew had now been hired to work on official Eddsworld videos, but these minisodes had also been taking away focus from the film itself. But because McCoy was an official character, Pip privately messaged certain members to help give the character an official backstory in the form of a new animation. A cute idea on paper, but this film thing had been in production for 7 years. At what point do you consider more content to be a form of highly elaborate procrastination? So basically, the whole thing was much the same as before. Pip was making all the same mistakes as old directors, and Colin didn't have much control over any of it. And then something weird happened. Eddsworld came back. All of this fan movie stuff had been going on alongside a 4-year gap in Eddsworld content, but starting in 2019 we saw a bunch of new illustrations for social media and eventually an entire animated feature the next year. And the people making this content had been found for their work on the fan movie, including the 2 directors who'd been hired earlier in 2020. This was obviously a fantastic thing for everyone, including the artists who'd essentially been given their big break, but it raised an important question. Did the fan movie even need to exist anymore? The directors had been sniped by a much bigger and arguably more important project, so it's not like they could devote time to directing an entire movie alongside it. They could have added yet another plank to this ship of Theseus of a production by hiring yet another director, but why would they? The fan movie had been the only Eddsworld related thing to look forward to for about 4 years, but now that Eddsworld was back, the fan movie was just less important than it once was. Then consider that so much of the crew had been recognised for their talent and were now working on Eddsworld itself. This was starting to look less like a fan movie and more like this weird side story that some of the artists were working on sometimes. But it wasn't canon to Eddsworld, and it used the story of some guy that was barely even involved anymore. It just did not make sense to carry on with this thing. And so, after 7 years in development, the fan movie was quietly cancelled behind the scenes. Before announcing this cancellation, they wanted to give the fans something. So they had the brilliant idea to create an archive of all the assets produced for the film, in one big folder that was free for anyone to view. I've personally always seen value in archiving and preserving artwork, so making everything publicly available sounds like a no-brainer to me. And so they got to work on this big archive project with all the model sheets and all the concept art and all the material that was ever made for production. They would finish this gigantic collection, and instead of a movie, they'd release the folder into the world free for all. And then things got bad. In September 2020, the person who started the fan movie was called out for acts of misconduct over private messaging. I try to avoid the ugly side of humanity on this channel, and I honestly don't think that this is my story to tell. All of the information is out there if you're curious enough, but there isn't really anything I can add beyond capitalizing on the painful experiences of the victim myself. Just note that it was very bad, and there was no way that the fan movie could pretend to keep going after this. And remember, Mark had almost nothing to do with the film anymore. By now he was just a voice actor and a sound guy, but he was so deeply associated with the project that support for the film took a complete nosedive. Not that support really mattered anymore because the film was dead anyway, for reasons that had nothing to do with Mark. They were already going to announce the cancellation once the project archive was ready. They just needed to get the cancellation on the record immediately to denounce Mark's actions and stop the harassment that everyone else publicly associated with the film was wrongly receiving. In fact, one previous crew member was so upset at Mark's actions that they leaked a storyboard of his entire original cut of the fan movie, a scrapped storyboard from 3 years and 2 directors prior. And it's not good. So on the one hand, it's not really fair to judge a movie in such an unfinished state. Literally, the film just cuts off partway through the climax and there are only a few seconds of actual finished animation here. Most films won't be any good until they go through editing, and it is impossible to underestimate the importance of sound and music, which this cut barely has any of. But at the same time,
our blood contains a lethal chemical that can poison whatever species comes into contact with it. But I've never held a real gun before! And bringing us into this? Some innocent English folk who do nothing but sit around and drink tea all day?
Well, at least I can finally come out of the closet. Yeah, this is gonna be a long movie.
Have you ever watched a movie that feels both gay and homophobic at the same time?
This is clearly not 7 years of work, and that's because it wasn't. They'd worked out that this cut was no good 3 years before this thing was even leaked. This wasn't the Eddsworld Fan Movie, this was Mark's version of the Eddsworld Fan Movie, but that didn't matter. There was no way to stop the leaks, and now the very idea of the film was tainted in the public eye. And then it got even worse. Shortly after Mark's original cut had been leaked, Pip 2 had his own call-out made against him. As with Mark, I'm not going to go into detail about what happened here because all of the information is out there, but it too was very ugly. And unlike Mark, Pip was still in charge of what was left of the fan movie when he was called out. Pip abandoned ship and left the internet, leaving Colin to pick up the pieces of a dead project. Okay, so now what? The fan movie was dead and buried, no question about it. No more directors, no more iterations on the script, nothing more could be done with that idea. But was there anything here worth salvaging? Well, kinda. There was still the 7-year back catalogue of material made by some pretty standout artists. There's a reason that so many of the animators are now working on Eddsworld itself. They know how to make some pretty fantastic stuff, and it'd be a shame to let it all go to waste. Not to mention General McCoy and Private Martin. Everyone still loves them. They've got great designs and loads of story potential. And now Colin owns the commercial rights to these characters and all of the other fan movie assets. In June 2021, Colin got in touch with a close friend and one of the more standout fans of McCoy, Commander Cat, to be the new co-owner of the McCoy and Martin characters. Cat had worked with Colin on several projects before this, and was practically spearheading McCoy's own fanbase. The two got to work on conceptualizing a new story with the characters, alongside redesigning both of them. For the remainder of 2021 and 2022, Cat and Colin went back and forth constructing a plot, story beats, characters, motivations, all that jazz. And in July 2022, from the ashes of the fan movie arose Operation Lost Cause, a thriller drama webcomic about a 22-year-old Louis Martin, a newly enlisted private at Area 51 who is taken under the wing of the infamous General Arthur McCoy. And it is genuinely beautiful. The main characters have been overhauled and everything now takes place in its own universe, separate from that of Eddsworld. They've already finished the prologue and you can check it out right now on their website, lostcausecomic.com, and they have a Twitter that you can follow for all that good stuff. If you're interested in the fate of these characters and or just love reading comics about traumatized people, then definitely give it a look. If for no other reason than that incredible colour palette and a very, very cute bird. Oh, and that public archive of all the assets made over the course of the film's production, well, that's all available as well. I've been showing you some of the artwork throughout this video, but there is so much more available right now, including scripts from all stages of production and a bunch of little test animations. It's all in the description of this video, and I'd highly suggest giving it a look as well. The end of the Eddsworld fan movie marked an end to an incredibly weird and messy time in the fandom. As a movie, it was an undeniable failure, a nice idea with a terrible execution and terrible management. But as an entity of its own, it gave fans something to rally around during the Great Hiatus and gave a bunch of ultra-talented individuals a chance to do bigger and better things. And after everything is said and done, through all of the ugliness and all of the hardship, the love that carried the Eddsworld fan movie spawned things of genuine beauty.
There's things in life you simply need to know. Like sun and rain and trust in letting go. It takes a bit of suffering, sleepless nights and wandering, before you make it safely